As a Hong Konger who am now in exile, I watch freedoms in my city being destroyed and my colleagues and friends being sent into jail. I can tell you that China does not hesitate to bend the rules of the games and international standard just to serve its own interests, and even worse, silence, suppress, or lock up those who dare criticize it. Just look at what China has done in Hong Kong, a free society who has a rich history of civil activism and rule of law, whose right and freedom are guaranteed in the Sino-British Joint Declaration, a very solemn promise made by China to the world. And now China and Hong Kong is turned into another mainland city over a span of a year or two. Tens of thousands of protesters were arrested standing up for their freedom. Many dozens of traditional civil society organizations crumbled under the political pressure. Opposition leader being charged and sent into jail for simply running an elections, and the national security law crushed virtually every civil and political freedom in Hong Kong. There is no more protest, no more electoral campaign, and there is no more free flow of information in Hong Kong. And I think the Beijing Winter Olympics tells a very similar story compared to that of Hong Kong. China wants to reap the benefit and reputation of being a major international player, but is not willing to abide by the standard and the rules of the world. Instead, it wants to silence and suppress international critics and buy off companies and countries who are willing to acquiesce. And the Beijing Olympic Games unfortunately become the facade for China to showcase its powers and to whitewash its human rights abuse. What China wants is to force the world into silence, tolerate its abysmal standard of human rights, and just treat business as usual. China also wants to export and normalize the culture of self-censorship that is pervasive in Hong Kong and other Chinese cities to the world. And I think it's incumbent upon us now to continue to denounce China. And IOC should be ashamed of themselves by treating business as usual. IOC in the past launched a global branding campaign called Celebrate Humanity. But now the Games are hosted by a country who explicitly commit crimes against humanity. It's now even impossible to rule out Uyghur forced labor content in Olympic branded merchandise. How can the athlete comfortably play the games while knowing that some miles away there are actually Uyghurs being put into concentration camp? And how can we as the audience comfortably watch the games or buy products from Olympic sponsor, knowing that the money is being poured into the pockets of companies who do not hesitate to sell out human rights and kowtow to Beijing for profits? Olympic Games are supposed to put a spotlight to the host country, and I agree. Let's put a spotlight on the human rights abuse in Hong Kong, Tibet, and to the Uyghur people, and educate the world about the human price we pay for the so-called rise of China. And let's put a spotlight on the multinational companies, Airbnb, Coca-Cola, Intel, P&G, and Visa, so on, or the broadcaster who are complicit in the whole scheme orchestrated by Beijing. We should call them out and hold them accountable to a higher ethical standard. And lastly, let's also put a spotlight on the activists oppressed by China, like many of my friends and colleagues here and their friends and families back in China under their oppression, who continue to speak out against Chinese authoritarian rules and trying to bring truth to the light.